So today's guest is actually one I met after a guest lecture at my university. He gave a very insightful talk called The Invisibility of Technology, and I knew immediately after the first slide that I need to talk to him. So Wim Hoogstad, it's nice to have you on. Can you give us a mini introduction to you, your work, and your thesis?
Yes, okay, thanks, Tony. My name is Wim Hoogstad. I am a Dutchman. I studied engineering a long time ago at the Technical University of Delft in the Netherlands. And I joined business, and I spent basically all my working career in business. Only the first 1 or 2 years doing things that we were, let's say, technical. After that, I got into management functions and more senior management functions, and traveled the world, both for business and to live in America, in Germany, in Belgium, in the Netherlands, in England a few times. So that was my career, and then I retired at the end of that and did some other stuff like consulting and starting up some small businesses. And then I got bored with that too, with business, with the world of business. And I started a study in philosophy, which hopefully is now finished. I submitted my dissertation just before Christmas, and I'm waiting whether that gets approved or not.
Yeah, and it's definitely a pretty interesting combination, engineering with philosophy with this business.
Yeah.
And it's definitely one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you. So in your talk, you mentioned the acceleration of technology, how innovation and invention are occurring so rapidly that most of us can no longer even imagine what technologies will have in 50 or 100 years. And I actually also wrote a piece about that exact idea, which is on my website. And I just wanted to ask, why do you think that's happening, and why is it a problem that we're facing today, this
Well, I think
acceleration?
there are quite a few people that have thought about that. Particularly, an interesting question has always been: if you go back about 1,000 years, or even 800 years, in the year 1200, both the Arab world and the Chinese world were technologically probably further developed than Europe. And then how come, is the question, that it suddenly took off? Some people think it is to do with a cultural stance, that Christianity was, which was at the time, of course, the religion in Europe. Everybody, bar maybe 2 or 3, was religious. You couldn't even say you weren't, and it was totally woven into the fabric of society. The other thing that has to do with it, that it were many competing countries. So if something didn't work in one, then it worked in another one. Something else that had to do with it was probably the Reformation may have had something to do with it. Luther and Calvin loosening people from basically from this thought that authority is truth, rather than that you had to find truth for yourself. And then, well, the Europeans started to improve the technologies that they found in China. Like printing was first invented in China. It never took off there, because to print thousands and thousands of different characters is a very tough business. But when it was done in Germany, you only had to contend with the 25 or 26 characters of the alphabet. And therefore you could set words, and printing came about. So all these technologies and all these factors worked together. Now today, and it's accelerating all the time, because the transport is improving. We have America, we have China, we have India also. If you look at the number of patents in the world, Arab countries produce almost none. If you look at the number of businesses created in the world, almost none. So there is definitely a cultural, or maybe which is very, very much influenced by religion. There is very much a cultural aspect to why technology takes off. I would say China, with all its intellectual power, didn't really embrace technology until about maybe 40, 50 years ago. And the Confucian culture just didn't want it or look at it or consider it as
Yeah.
an important thing.
And you definitely, you see, I think capitalism also has a really big role to play in all this in the development of technology. And like you mentioned that previously you would have, countries or like nation states competing in their technology, but nowadays in the modern world we have companies that are, have equivalent size to previous nations. Now that those companies are competing in their technology. And as China adopted, you know, slightly more capitalistic ways, then they also entered that.
So it's not one factor, Tony. It's many, and each one reinforces the other one. So the internet must have something to do with it. Information being available almost immediately must have something to do with it. The 10 million scientists that are working in the world today must have something with it. Competition, and so on, and so on, and so on. And everything reinforces all the other factors, leading to exponential growth. Yeah.
And do you think that's, something we're going to be able to stop eventually if we have to? Like, you think we'll ever be just satisfied with the technology that we'll have? Like, we'll just say, okay, like we're fine. We don't need to keep sabotaging our own humanity.
Yeah. I will try to stay a bit in the philosophical mode because it gives a slightly different angle on it all. Either Socrates or Plato. I think Socrates said something which we very often repeat today, which is necessity is the mother of invention. That may have been so one time, but I don't think that is the case anymore. Much technology isn't really necessary. So it is opportunity is the mother of invention today. If a business thinks it can develop something that finds a market, it will do so, whether the market needs it, strictly speaking, or not. I have right now in my hand a pen that has 4 different colors. If you push one of those things down, is that needed? No, I don't think it is. So necessity is no longer the mother of invention, it's opportunity. And will it stop? Well, there will be, nothing grows exponentially forever. Nothing can. So it will stop or it will flatten out. Should it? That is not, I have read Heidegger. His view is that technology is not necessarily dangerous, but that it should get its own, it should be kept in its own place. Let's say it should be, his view is simply said, the world is much bigger and there is much wider needs and things in the world than technology. And his opinion is, and he has good arguments for it, is that the way we think today is completely determined by technology. And we see the world in technological terms, and everything becomes a resource. We capitalize everything. The HR, the human resource, humans are resources. Human resource departments in businesses or in universities talk about their human capital. Let's say a university, the number of PhDs they have at work. And we capitalize everything and we see the world only through those kind of eyes. And he says that there is a more primal truth. Now, he doesn't give an answer really as to what that more primal truth is. And he says there's more to existence than this technological view of the world. He doesn't reject technology. He just wants to put it in its place. And I would agree with that. We don't need to reject technology. There's much good in it, whether it's medical technology or information or the good things that technology indirectly brings about, but it needs to be kept in place.
Yeah, and I wonder, I mean, nowadays we're seeing like some technologies pop up that are just, you know, that we couldn't even have fathomed, right? Like half a century ago, like things that provide the things that previously religion provided, you know, like even things like anti-aging, like immortality.
Yes, if you woke up in the morning 1,000 years ago, you probably thought about your dreams, and maybe you needed to go to church or you needed advice from the priest, and everything was religious and everything was determined by saints and gods and witches and you know, it was a very, very different world. Today the same thing is true, but everything is technological. If I wake up, let's say if I stay somewhere and I wake up in the morning, everything I see is technological. From the blankets I sleep under, or the duvet, the pillow where my head is on, to my phone that woke me up, to the lights that I switch on, to the ceiling, to the floor. There is nothing there that people of, let's say, 100,000 years ago would recognize. So it is all technical. We built this whole technical world for ourselves. Yeah. And it is so ubiquitous that it becomes invisible. That is my point. You grow up in it, and it is like, does a fish know he swims in water? It is so ubiquitous that we don't see it anymore. We expect it almost. We expect that if there is a problem, technology will provide a solution. And in fact, it has done. It produced vaccines. Well, let's start with philosophy again. Aristotle ranked human activities in three levels. The lowest level was techne, or technology, if you wish, which included in his time all the arts. So all the making of sculptures and things like that. At a higher level was all thinking about ethics. So anything to do with how to behave. And at the highest level was scientia, with science, therefore. And so his interpretation of science, which wasn't quite the same as today, but knowledge about the world. And so techne always was at the bottom of and in those days largely done by all the work that was done, all the handicrafts were done by slaves and all that. And it remains like that for thousands of years. You see all these religious writers, Augustine and Thomas of Aquino and others, they write and write and write, but never about technology, even though already 800 years ago, when what are called the scholastics rediscovered Aristotle and influenced the Christianity very much. They never write about technology. Technology is ignored whilst it's all the way around them. Already in the time of Jesus, there were houses and carts and horses and agriculture and sailing and steel and bronze and weaponry and books and libraries and so on and so on. Still, it is something that we almost don't regard as technology or as a background, like trees and grass. I think that is why it's, and technology, of course, today, if you're a child of 10, it's all around you. You play with it, you sit in it, you go in it, you are brought into it in a car to your school, or you sit on a bike or whatever. But it's not it is never coming into real consciousness that this is all human-made things, and it wasn't always there, and it's getting more and more and accelerates all the time. So I think it is largely invisible. If I ask somebody what do you think of technology, people always talk about, let's say, the mobile phone or so, or the smartphone, or what LED lights or things like that, but never about a sailing boat or a hammer or a chair or a house or all the technology that we really, really depend on. And it's invisible, and I think it will stay like that. It is just our environment, as I said, like a fish in water. The water is not recognized by the fish until he's dragged onto the dry land, let's say. And if we would end up naked in a forest somewhere without any technologies, we would last very long.
That's definitely an interesting idea. But I do want to pivot a little bit. In your talk, you pointed out that without humans, there wouldn't be technology. But then interestingly, you actually asked the reverse as well. Would there be modern humans without technology? And so my question then is, do you think that technology has altered our definition of humanity or the human experience, or perhaps that it's changing or controlling us more than we are it?
Oh, without a doubt. I have no doubt about that. I was just reading an article. It was an article on how our capacity to focus has demonstrably shortened the time that we can focus. As soon as a question, even I was thinking, even if you have a dinner conversation with some friends or family at Christmas, somebody will have an opinion. And for one or two, the immediate grasp is for the phone to check whether the facts that are mentioned are correct. And I found that doing my dissertation, every time I was writing something I wasn't certain about or wanted another view on, I grabbed my Google access and read about it. And it's demonstrably so that people have shorter attention spans, and I can't focus for hours on end anymore, just physically impossible, apparently. But that is not all. I mean, always technology has had an influence on people. We are more dexterous than a chimpanzee because we learned to use and make tools. And the better tool makers were the more dexterous people and had more survival chances. Fire, our ability to control fire was one of the biggest technological inventions ever, which also gave all the energy and possibilities to grow our brains. And the growth of hominid brains went very much together with the growth of the use of the control of fire. So there are agriculture, no doubt, has also changed us. So technology, no doubt, has physically and mentally changed us. So without technology, we would not be the same person. Not at all. We might not even have had the same size of brains. We might not have been humans in today's terms at all. When by the time we start to modify our own genes.
Yeah. So me and probably a lot of the audience, are techies, scientists, entrepreneurs, and the like, and we're all, I think, pretty solution oriented. So do you think there's some sort of solution to removing this invisibility of technology? Like, can we, as we enter an age of exponential innovation and reaching technologies that are potentially unethical or dangerous, is there a way of shining a light on those?
Many things that you grow up with are invisible to yourself. Many things in you grow up in a culture. Everybody, excuse me, everybody grows up in a culture. And in that culture, what is done is basically invisible to yourself unless or until you're exposed to another culture that does it in a different way. And you say, hey, how come? Or let's say if you're an American, you're growing up in a very individualistic, entrepreneurial, and so on culture. And you think that is how people need to be or how people are. If you would then go to a far more social culture, like many of the Asian countries, you see behavior that is surprising because your own behavior was so natural to you that it was invisible. Now, technology also is part of the culture that we grow up in and is thus invisible to us. It is only if we would be, let's say, willing to live with some tribe in a forest somewhere in South America or Africa, that we would become totally aware of our dependence on technology. Whether it's a fridge or our clothing. So I don't think you can make people aware unless you expose people to the absence of it. And that will be very hard to do.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, one of the reasons I started the Utopian is to at least attempt shining a light on some of those technologies and sharing different perspectives. Hopefully people will recognize some of those unethical or dangerous technologies. So it was an absolute pleasure and honor speaking with you, Wim. And quickly before we end, is there what's the best way to learn more about you or get in contact with you?
I'm of an age whereby I do what I like, kind of a thing. So if people ever want to be in contact with me, they should contact you, and you can. You're free to give them my email.
Sure. Thank you for joining me. I hope you have a great 2022.
Well, I hope you too, and lots of success.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the UPod. If you did, please give a like if you're on YouTube, and follow the UPod on whichever platform you prefer. That's Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Apple Podcasts. If you want to learn more, go to www.theutopian.blog and join my newsletter. I also share exclusive interview highlights, infographics, and community events which you can join all on my Instagram at the.utopian.blog and on my LinkedIn page, The Utopian. I'm always open to being messaged on any of those platforms if you ever want to get in touch. I really appreciate your support, and I hope to see you next time.